John, you once compared Dick Cheney to Darth Vader. What Star Wars character would Stephen Miller be?
Oh, Jesus. I don't even know if there's I don't know that that universe has conjured up. I think it would probably be, kind of one of those characters that they mentioned, but, like Darth Sidious, like one of those. It's like, and my teacher taught me the power over life and death. His name was Sidious. It's one of, and it would be a sibilant. There'd always be that like.
What's up, everybody? Major retired Richard Ojeda here. And Jon Stewart once said Dick Cheney was Darth Vader. But Stephen Miller? Well, the truth is that even the Star Wars universe wouldn't claim him.
Thanks to President Trump's massive increase in ICE arrests nationwide, all of the ICE beds have been filled up.
Trump, sure. He's King Jabba the Hutt, bloated and immobile, surrounded by sycophants, obsessed with revenge, slathered in gold, and ruling from a swampy palace of decay. He hoards power, abuses the weak, and treats loyalty like a bribe. He doesn't lead, he lounges. He doesn't think, he feeds. And every time he opens his mouth, you expect something to croak out that smells like death and fast food. And yet, with all these cartoon villains, all these sabers and stormtroopers and space grifters, Stephen Miller still doesn't measure up. He's not good enough for Star Wars, not even as a B-tier stormtrooper who gets knocked out by a door. No, Stephen Miller is what you get when you mix a middle manager's lust for control with a B-movie horror director's sense of humanity. He's not even the emperor. He's not even the guy who gets force choked in a staff meeting. He's the assistant to the regional manager of evil.
We want to go to every Republican state. Now, of course, in a sane country, Democrats would do it too, but they love the illegals. They hate the Americans. But we want every governor of a red state, and if you're watching tonight, pick up the phone, call DHS, work with us to build facilities in your state so that we can get the illegals out, we can get the criminals out. What's dehumanizing is when American citizens are stripped of their rights and their liberties by the invasion of illegal aliens. What is dehumanizing is when Democrats let illegal alien rapists into the country to attack our children. That is dehumanizing.
He doesn't belong in a galaxy far, far away. He belongs behind a sticky desk at Nova Corp's headquarters in Guardians of the Galaxy, stoking his Palantir stock portfolio with one hand, sipping cold gas station coffee with the other, getting way too excited watching grainy detention footage on loop like it's porn. His joy isn't justice, it's cruelty. He gets off on the process, on the paperwork, on the suffering. He's not a Sith. He's a sadist in a cubicle. He's not Star Wars. He's not even Marvel. He's the monster in the sci-fi original called Swamp Camp 3, the maggoting. He's Frankenfish. He's MAGA Shark versus Justice. He's the face you cast when the main villain is too charismatic and you need something a little more greasy, something that makes your skin crawl just looking at him.
Now, we reach out to other states, Stephen, and a lot of them are open to helping. Alaska told us that we don't have alligators, but we have lots of bears. However, they aren't aware of any plans for an Alaska version of bear. I said bear Alcatraz. So, Stephen, there's good news there.
And that's who's in charge of immigration policy. So the next time they tell you that it's about security, remember it's not. It's about people like Stephen Miller living out their power fantasies on the most vulnerable, with a signature, with a smirk, with silence from everyone who knows better. And the force is not with them. It never was. But let's snap back to reality, because this isn't sci-fi. This is happening right now in America. Stephen Miller isn't writing fan fiction. He's writing policy. And that detention camp in the Florida Everglades, that's not a rejected scene from Andor. That's real. A tent city built in 8 days where women and children are tossed into mosquito-infested flood zones, surrounded by alligators, denied showers, fed maggoty slop once a day, and treated like fugitives for daring to ask for safety. They call it Alligator Alcatraz. Let's stop being cute. Let's call it what it is. Alligator American Auschwitz. Miller's proud of this. Laura Ingraham brags about this. Fox laughs at it. And while they mock the weak, smear the innocent, and treat asylum seekers like villains from a video game, they're gutting your health care. They're slashing your Social Security. They're cutting your weather alerts. They're weaponizing your silence. This isn't about safety. It's not about law and order. It's about power. It's about pain. It's about selling cruelty as policy and doing it so fast they hope you don't notice until your turn is in the cage. And this is where the mask slips, where the MAGA movement trades in its golden cross for a barbed wire halo. They thump their Bibles while cheering a swamp prison built in 8 days, flooding in mosquitoes and sewage, and joke about immigrants being eaten by alligators, all while Matthew 25 is right there. I was a stranger and you welcomed me not. But instead of compassion, they built cages. Instead of welcome, they served maggots. And while Jesus washed feet, they laugh about snake pits and teach detainees how to zigzag so they don't get eaten alive. That's not faith. That's fascism in a church pew. Trump and his cult promised law and order, but what they delivered was cruelty dressed up as patriotism. They said they'd fix the border, but they created alligator Alcatraz. They said they'd stop the chaos, but they manufactured a cruelty carnival that runs on blood and fear. They said they were pro-life and then tore children from their parents' arms and left them sobbing in cages, orphaned by bureaucracy and indifference. They said that they would bring back Christian values, but Jesus never signed an executive order to dehydrate families in the desert. Jesus never mocked the hungry or turned away from the sick. And he sure as hell didn't smirk while babies slept on concrete under thermal blankets. They said that they'd protect your jobs, but handed billion-dollar contracts to Elon Musk, who spent it on exploding rockets and subscription fees. They promised to take us to Mars. They gave us flaming Teslas, crashing satellites, and a man-child tweeting memes from his golden toilet. They said they'd fight for the working class, then gutted the National Labor Relations Board and handed your wages to Wall Street. They promised to cut your taxes and gave themselves a tax break so fat it needed its own zip code. They said that they would lower gas prices, then turned energy policy into a MAGA sideshow while letting oil companies rake in record profits. They said they'd protect your rights, then shoved judges onto the bench who want to police your uterus, your books, and your marriage. They said that they would defend the Constitution, then stormed the Capitol with zip ties, bear spray, and Bible verses scrawled onto riot shields. They said they'd drain the swamp and then built a new one in the Everglades where the water runs red and the Constitution is toilet paper. They said that they'd cut waste, then blew up the deficit. They said that they'd bring greatness, but brought subpoenas. They said they'd build a wall, but what they really built was a cult, one that feeds on fear, sells t-shirts soaked in dogma, and turns cruelty into currency. This isn't about border security. It's about performance art for the sadistic and the stupid, a parade of Christian cosplay and patriot porn, where the only commandment is thou shalt obey Trump, where the Sermon on the Mount gets rewritten by Stephen Miller. And when it all falls apart, when the food rots, the water floods, the courts collapse, and the rockets crash, they'll blame everyone but themselves. They'll scream about drag queens and vaccines and Hunter Biden's laptop and some deep state ghost they invented in a fever dream. But no one made them lie. No one made them cheer alligators. No one made them turn their faith into a weapon and their country into a circus. That was a choice to trade truth for vengeance, love for spite, and hope for a hat. And that choice is why everything they touch turns to shit. Donald Trump isn't just Jabba the Hutt. He's Palpatine in a MAGA hat, a power-hungry ghoul whispering about law and order while building an empire of fear. He didn't destroy democracy overnight. He corrupted it from the inside, one executive order, one judge, one lie at a time. And like Palpatine, he didn't rise alone. He was cheered, applauded, enabled, because as Padme warned us, so this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. Every detention camp, every book ban, every dog whistle turned bullhorn, every Christian who clapped while kids were thrown into cages and women were left to bleed in border cells. They didn't stop him. They literally crowned him. Just like Rome, the Republic did not fall in a day. It fell inch by inch, lie by lie, decree by decree, until the Senate became a circus, the Constitution became optional, and cruelty became the brand. And Stephen Miller, he's not just a footnote. He's the scribe, the ghostwriter of this American authoritarian fantasy. The guy who reads The Rise of the Empire and thought it was a how-to manual. The architect of Alligator Alcatraz. The bureaucrat of broken families. But let's not get it twisted. This isn't just about the past. This isn't even just about Trump. This is about Project 2025, where MAGA doesn't just cosplay fascism, they institutionalize it. Where future Stephen Millers don't just write the policies, they run the departments. Where loyalty replaces law, where cruelty becomes currency, and where the American experiment becomes a failed state wrapped in a flag. You want to know what happens when people like Trump and Miller win? You get a border where human rights go to die. You get FEMA gutted, the Weather Service cut, the planet ignored. You get Medicaid replaced with migrant field labor. You get executive power without limit and morality without meaning. And the next time someone tells you, but Trump's funny, or he's better than Joe Biden, or at least he's not a politician, just remember, that's what they said in Rome. That's what they said in Naboo. And that's what they said before the thunderous applause. And when it all comes crashing down, when the empire they built starts devouring its own, don't say that you wasn't warned. Because fascism doesn't knock. It builds a camp, calls it security, and dares you to look away. And that is an absolute fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.